Hello, welcome to the show. Today we have Hamel with us, and Hamel has been one with the tech world for last 20 years. So he worked at Data Robot. He was a staff engineer at GitHub. He did projects at various large companies such as Airbnb, for instance, right? Machine learning projects. And I think I could go for the entire call just listing out the amazing things that Hamel did or is doing. Right now, he's a core contributor to Fast AI, and he is an entrepreneur in residence as well, I believe.
That's the great
Excited to
thing about
have you.
LinkedIn. You can just make up whatever title you want. It's amazing.
Well, I should try that.
Yeah.
The king of something. I need to just figure out of what, and put it right there. That would be beautiful. But Hamel is sharing his knowledge with the world. He's at this point in his career where he can do that, adding a lot of value. And that's what I think that is the idea for this call. So very grateful that we get a chance to chat. And on the exciting side of things, Hamel, I think you're starting to work on a course. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't want to commit to anything just yet, but I've been writing and putting together some materials to help people learn Kubernetes, to help data scientists specifically learn Kubernetes. Not all of Kubernetes, just the part of Kubernetes that I think is valuable to know.
Just the part that's valuable to them. I love it because I'm not a big fan of wasting my time. So if somebody can tell me which part is valuable to me as a data scientist, I would definitely jump on that. So we'll link to the course, to the waiting list for the course from the description of the video, right? And if that's something that might be interesting to you, dear reader, please make sure to sign up, preferably with your work email, so that we can gauge the interest.
No, thank you. I mean, if we get enough interest, then we'll do the course. We don't really know yet. We just put it there just to see, okay, is something that could be interesting.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so Kubernetes. Wow, why would I need this in my life?
Yeah. So I think it's like interesting to have a discussion. I was thinking about this, like how we're talking about Docker. We had a fight about Docker last week. This week we're fighting about Kubernetes.
I love these fights, and I linked to the fight to our previous fight. It was really fierce. So I'll try to link from this point in the video if I'll figure out how to do it. If not, the link will be in the description. That's for sure. That was a good fight.
Very good fight. So I think the question is, you should learn things. I think, okay, do you agree with this? You should learn things that provide value to you. And the question is, perhaps you should try to, whatever value means to you, you can find out whatever it means, happiness, money, I don't know. So value per effort. It's things that have high value for the effort you put in. Those seem like good things.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So like when we say like, should you learn Docker? Should you learn Kubernetes? Okay, like, should you learn anything? I mean, you're learning YouTube right now, and I'm learning a little bit from you actually, because I ask you questions. And so, like learning YouTube videos, well, that doesn't seem like data science, but it seems valuable.
Yes.
So I guess like on that dimension, I would say like, okay, then like what should you learn as a data scientist? Like what's valuable? And then where I come from is, my thesis is whenever in my prior history, I have like gone and learned like things that people have found hard or have found boring that intersect with your work. They're maybe not like core data science, like what you think like, okay, I'm going to go learn scikit-learn, I'm going to TensorFlow, PyTorch. Okay. It doesn't, things that kind of are adjacent or touch you. I found that like the intersection of like cross-functional skills to be super high payoff per time spent. And so that's the angle I'm coming with. So
I love it.
Yeah, I want to know what your angle is.
No, I love your approach. And so to what you mentioned, outcome per unit of time spent. Exactly. I had a friend tell me some time ago that he's maximizing the essentially what you mentioned, like the delta of learning per delta of time expensed. That's like his, way of looking at life. And I feel the same, that this is the right path. And now, when it comes to combining skills, that is the sweet spot. Like you probably don't want to be just one thing in your life, because there are many people who are data scientists who are good at data science. But how many data scientists who are good at data science and maybe who are good at talking about data science, especially on video? Now, there are only a few that come to mind. And I'm a strong believer that, I want to be a good employee, or I want to bring value to the group of people that I am a part of. And you're right that being more than one thing is often the right path to do that, to stand out. You maybe then new opportunities open up to you. You essentially are not competing with the market of people, of thousands of people. This might be a way for you to defeat the stack of obsolescence, the resume stack, that if you end up on the resume stack and you count on somebody picking you up from that resume stack, that's a horrible way to live your life. But if you are slightly, unusual and can deliver value in ways that other people cannot, then suddenly, that this opens up quite a few opportunities to you, that I believe. So yeah, I'm all with you that learning compatible skills that could help me as a data scientist, I'm all for that. But still, Kubernetes, it's a ginormous beast. It's enterprise software if I ever came across one, right?
Yeah. So, okay, let me pose some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Would you code without error messages? Like, if you could not see any error messages, how would you feel? Would you say
that would be
impossible?
that would be horrible. And some people are doing this to themselves by using TensorFlow.
Or some people just don't even read error messages, as you could
Yeah,
tell
some
from some
people,
GitHub issues
yeah, they
at
don't read
all.
the error message, or they use a framework that produces such cryptic error messages that, you still try to read the stack trace, but, and, obviously, that's why I love Jupyter notebooks, because I'm closer to the interpreter. I can query it by using debug, right? But that's a separate story. So yes, error messages, absolutely. This is such a useful thing to have in your life.
And another thing is, what about documentation?
Mm-hmm.
Could you live without documentation? Like,
That
if you had a
that
code without any documentation for anything, do you think that would be hard? Do you agree? In
that would
some
be
ways?
very hard, especially for machine learning, because very often, we use these weird abstractions that are very hard to understand from code, even if the code is well written. Now, I have a big issue with how most of machine learning code is written, but that's a separate story. But yes, without documentation, no, life becomes extremely hard.
Okay, so let me tell you about two things in that along those lines. So, error messages. So it's really important, no matter who you are, if you're using a tool, it can be Kubernetes, it can be Dask, it can be NVIDIA Triton, it can, be whatever it is. Okay, like Merlin, whatever it is. Okay, a lot of that stuff is deployed on Kubernetes, if not all of it, most of the time.
Yes.
And you need to be able to you need to read those logs if you use those tools. If you can't read the logs, you're kind of lost. And that is one fundamental skill. Like, how do you find the logs? Where are they? How do you view them? How do you know you're viewing the right one? Um, that's an example of something super useful to know. You don't need to be an expert in all of Kubernetes, but imagine a conversation where there's a infrastructure person on your team And if you have no idea what Kubernetes is, you don't want to touch it, you just message that person and say, hey, it doesn't work. You're going to
Yes.
piss that person off. Imagine when someone tells you, walks over to your desk and says, hey, my Python program doesn't work. You would lose your mind. You would say, what is the error message? Can you be a
Yes.
reproducible? Like, did you look into it? And
Yes.
so a lot of people, honestly, like a lot of people have no idea. They don't know where to begin.
Mhm.
And yeah, so like that's one example. Second, so that's kind of, looking at logs and also debugging a little bit, like being able to kind of run some terminal commands to say like, oh, okay, like what is in this application? Like, what files are here? Um, what's going on, what's installed in this environment, things like that. Just to kind of like what you would do on your laptop. I would say that is sort of table stakes for working almost. Like
Mhm.
interesting, like in a lot of these situations. And so it's like, so that's one thing. Second thing is when you have, yeah, so as far as documentation is concerned, Kubernetes allows you to find things like where the endpoints of different, if you're like, hey, I want to know where this Jupyter server, is, like, what's the URL for it in my company? Like, where am I
Mhm.
supposed to go? What's the IP address? Um, or do I have, like, why am I not able to log into this thing? Maybe the login thing, no, but like, okay, like, what are the different applications? Where can I find them? If you know a little bit about Kubernetes, you can look that up. You can sort of see what's there, look it up, and be effective right away. You can see if like something's healthy, if it's not broken, it's not broken. Again, when you approach your teammate, the person you're working with, it's a completely different conversation when you come with some information. You say, hey, you know what? I don't see this certain thing anymore. It's not there. Or,
So,
and these are the logs for it. And I see that it's died. Like it has a thing here. And when I looked at the logs, this and this happened. That's interesting. I see a CUDA out of memory error. Um, okay. And I think this is why. And you're like, oh, okay, this person, you can actually get help. Whereas if you don't do that, then you don't get any help.
so Hamel, if I'm reading this right, you're essentially advocating that the data scientists should have these Kubernetes survival skills, right? Essentially, if Kubernetes happens in your life, you probably want to be able to engage with it, to be a valuable team member, to be more effective on the job. That would be the idea, and for that you need certain survival skills. And I read the documentation of Docker. I had the pleasure of looking at Docker Swarm and Kubernetes at some point in my life, and I'll tell you that documentation is not user friendly, and it doesn't tell you, if you start reading it, it doesn't begin with, hey, this is how you understand the logs, or this is how you understand the bigger picture. It like hits you right on the head with a bunch of settings and jargon that is a completely different language.
Oh yeah. So I agree with, there's one thing that's a problem with both, especially with Kubernetes. Kubernetes, the material, documentation, education, everything is geared towards administrators and operators, not for data scientists. And so that's something that I'm working on, is to kind of distill down the relevant pieces of information that you might care about. Of course, I personally had to go on the very hard journey of
Yes.
doing all the
You have to.
things that you don't want to know about, and like all that stuff, but that's fine.
You're
um
sacrificing yourself in the community. I see like you're going through all this pain and bringing us this golden nugget, that distilling the journey into what we really need. So hey, I didn't expect that I would say this, but I'm starting to be excited for Kubernetes, and present it in the light that you're presenting it, right?
yeah, and so okay, let's go back to Docker. So if you
Yeah.
agree that Docker, no matter what you feel about Docker, like maybe you hate Docker, maybe you love Docker, but you agree that Docker is essential. whether you like it or not. You have to deploy some things. Some applications only live there. You don't have a
See,
choice.
so the whole discussion that we started having a week ago, and I learned a lot through it and also clarified my thinking. And I came to the conclusion that I love Docker for work because it allows me to work with my colleagues from all over the world, and run like I can test my code in 3 different environments, TensorFlow, HugeCTR, and PyTorch, and within seconds from each other, right? So I love Docker for work. I don't love Docker, or I hate Docker when I would be using it on a small team, or how I used it in the past, or somebody starting a Kaggle competition or a machine learning project when they are a consultant, and they say, yeah, let me spin up this Docker environment, because to me this has led, and I consider myself a very proficient Docker user now, but this creates this overhead that you keep paying for over and over again. So I'm wondering if that's the same situation with Kubernetes, that maybe if I'm working on a machine learning project for this or that company, where maybe they want me to figure out if there's signal in the data, or they want me to hand off a model to some other team so that they can do something with it or create embeddings, whatever. If I'm just a single solo guy, that might not be the setting for Kubernetes.
No, that's not the setting. If you're just trying to do a proof of concept where you're handing your model off to someone else who's going to operationalize the model or whatever, absolutely not. But here's like the very short answer is like, if you can use if you agree that containers are essential for the certain things. So the next question you have to ask is who's gonna run those containers? Like, how are those going to get deployed? Who's going to schedule them? Who's going to keep those containers alive? What is the networking around those containers? Like, to where those containers can serve websites, and who's going to manage, like, what if one of them crashes, and who's going to like make sure the storage is correct, the security is correct, all that stuff. Like, basically the container is not the end. Okay. Like, your container is one step closer to being something that can sort of be deployed, quote, deployed. And that's what Kubernetes is, a container orchestrator. Like, it takes your container and it gives it like, serves it and maintains it, runs it, monitors it, puts networking around it, all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, like, that's the next step. It's kind of like
so
where it goes.
Generally, models are useful when they can be deployed and can be used in productions. Absolutely, in production, absolutely. So, but Kubernetes is a very heavy-duty machinery. It gives you it all, right? It's you can tweak even the tiniest of settings. So I'm wondering, where would you encounter it on a job and as a data scientist? Who uses Kubernetes?
Okay, so one example I gave is inspecting the logs. Let's say you're okay.
I get this. Like, so there are certain use cases that companies has, but how ubiquitous is Kubernetes? Do you see it everywhere nowadays in modern companies? Is it, if I'm building a startup, is it the first thing I will reach out for if I need to operationalize some machine learning models?
So there's 2 answers for this. One is that, okay, the first answer is just like how you would say, like, would we be having this debate about PyTorch? No. Like, you would say, no, it doesn't matter. Okay, but let's just step back. Like, how prevalent, if this debate was like, how prevalent is deep learning? We might say, well, I don't know, like, it's not that maybe it's not that prevalent, but do you need to know it? We would both say yes. Like,
yes.
That's the future of machine learning. You're not going to be able to hire anybody it doesn't make any sense like to just ignore that. That's kind of the standards, or that's kind of like where the thought, the brain trust is. All of these things, right? You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Same
Yeah.
thing with Kubernetes and DevOps people. Okay, like DevOps people, doesn't matter what you're doing, what kind of DevOps person you are, you kind of have to be like, that's how they feel about Kubernetes. It's like PyTorch. It's like the tool. It's a standard. It's
Got it.
so much of a standard in the field that regardless of whether or not you're using it or not, it's, if you're going to do a startup, probably you're going to end up using it because that's what is most commonplace. It's ubiquitous. It's kind of like the standard of things in the DevOps field, basically. And there's not that many options like comparable to that, to be honest.
So what you're saying is that it is becoming a standard that the DevOps people, for various reasons from their world, they are converging to. And if you're a data scientist, and that probably then goes also for smaller organizations such as startups, maybe even especially at startups, you want to be able to speak that language to some extent. You don't need to be super fluent. You don't need to, like, I don't know, create, I don't know even what it's called, like scaling groups and, the monitoring if this instance is utilized or whatever. That's the DevOps guys that do, right? But you as a machine learning person, you still want to be able to interface with
Yeah.
that team.
No, it's really amazing to be able to be comfortable with the terminology. Like before, when I didn't know Kubernetes, I would sit down with I would sit down with the DevOps person that's helping me, like a machine learning, like a person that on the machine learning infrastructure side of things. And they would I couldn't understand 80% of the words I say, like, hey, we're going to set up an ingress and we're going to do, we have to set up secrets and RBAC and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff means. And you just zone out. You know how it is. When you're talking to someone, you're just like, what you're saying, it might as well just be magic. And it just appears, just because I don't understand anything you're saying, it's probably super complicated and you just feel intimidated, you feel scared, and you can't really engage in a conversation. And as soon as you have some understanding of just the concept of what they're talking about, then you can have like a full conversation. And it's amazing feeling when you can do that. It's like living in a country when you don't know the language. And when you know the language, it's amazing. Like it's just amazing.
Yes,
And
it
like as data
changes it.
scientists, you often are living in the other country. Like you're living in the other country half the time. You're deploying your models. You're interfacing with these other people. You don't live in an island like some people do. That's fine, but a lot of people don't. And this is a good language. It's like good quote language to know. Yeah, and I think it's really empowering in that
Beautiful.
sense.
Beautiful. So to start learning that language, Hamel, I know that you have a video on your YouTube channel on deploying Jupyter Hub. Is that a good way to start getting our feet wet with this new language?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's a good way to. I have to think about more holistically, like maybe write sort of a syllabus or something like that. That is just kind of like, let me do something fun with
Yes.
Kubernetes, that's something that you would care about, just to like test the waters and kind of stuff like that. But yeah, that video I think is very approachable. One thing I want to say about Kubernetes is like, okay, so you have to change your mindset in a way that you might not expect. Like I know you personally, Radek, you are fine with changing your mindset, but maybe this is a different. What I'm talking when I say is a little bit different. So with Kubernetes, the YAML files, okay, they are meant to be copied and pasted. That's very counterintuitive because as developers, especially Python developers, we don't that that's a that is a bad mentality. You don't want to copy and paste Python code without understanding what it is, like, or you don't yeah, like it's not meant to be written one line at a time. Okay, these are configuration files. They're designed to be copied and pasted and edited. and you don't have to understand every single field.
Mm-hmm.
That you might not believe me, but it's I'm telling you that is what it's designed for.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, like I said, is meant to be copied and pasted. And once you realize that, it becomes far less intimidating.
Beautiful.
Because you start learning about the YAML, but you never ever write it from scratch ever. Just think
Mm-hmm.
about that. It's not like a programming language where you like programming languages, like if you're writing a Python program, yeah, you write it from scratch and there's value in that. There's not value in doing that in Kubernetes. So that makes it a lot less. That makes it, once you understand, and no one says that for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. Like it's not,
Oh,
you know,
I'm
there.
so used to that where, people in a world where they function, they are unable to explain to a person from outside of the world what the crucial bits are. I experienced the same with trying to get into machine learning. So, I know how far a thought like you shared with us here can go. And I'm all for that. If somebody can explain to me what the crucial bits of a given ecosystem are, like you did just a second ago, then this is something that I want to learn, because I know that, again, for an X amount of energy invested, I'm getting a good return on my time. Like so, wow.
And I just
That,
want to say
that,
one more thing.
hmm,
So
please.
if you know Docker like you
Yes.
do, you will really love Kubernetes because it leverages your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like it uses a lot of the same things and it basically accelerates your knowledge of containers because it's a container orchestrator. And so like I'll just give you an example. So do you know how when you want to SSH into a Docker container, you do like Docker exec dash IT blah blah what
Name of
that
container
you know
name
that
in bash.
you probably have memorized that incantation by now,
Uh,
right?
I do it. I write it out a couple of times a day. It's Docker exec
Exactly.
minus IT tab for the. I have a single Docker container running to autocomplete the name. Bin bash. It takes me to, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That
So you know
that's my
exactly what
life.
I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you want to do the same thing into a Kubernetes pod,
Mhm.
there's basically a container that is being run. You do a kubectl exec dash it. It looks almost very similar. You're like, oh, this feels like home. Like I'm doing the same thing, except I'm doing it on the cloud, you know? So you
Hmm.
transfer transfer a lot of you can lean into a lot of your skills and your understanding of things. Uh, because it is a container orchestrator, it's not, it's related to that. So it's
Wow.
cool in that way.
Wow. I can't believe what's happening here. You're getting me excited about Kubernetes. That's not something I expected. I know that we've been having this conversation about Kubernetes for a couple of weeks now, and as you remember, my starting point was very Kubernetes adverse. So, Hamel, thank you so much for taking me on this journey, and thank you so much for taking other people on this journey with us. Mm, sharing the things that can accelerate our progress, and apparently also teach us something that can give us superpowers in our workplace, or maybe can set us a bit apart from the crowd when applying for jobs. Those survival skills are much appreciated. So from the description, I will link to your video, to your Twitter account, so that if anyone wants to see how all this is developing, they can follow along the journey. Also, the course, the MLOps course that you're working on, potentially that you might work on if there's enough interest. So if listener, if this sounds like something that you'd like to learn more about, then please hop on the wait list. Somewhere from this video, possibly I will link to our previous fight, which was actually much more fierce than this one. Though today's was also very good, but I think I'm more accepting of of how the world operates now. So maybe I was a better listener today than the last time, but it's all good. It's all fun. Hamel, thank you so much for this conversation.
Do you have anything you want to fight about next week? I have an idea of what we could fight about.
What would that be?
GitHub Actions.
GitHub Actions. Yes, let's do this. Let's do this because to this day, I have no clue what GitHub Actions are. So I understand what they do, but I have no clue how to define them. You know, I know where to find them, maybe in the GitHub repository, but I'm not sure how to read them. And also, I have no clue how to get started with them. I tried following GitHub documentation, but again, you know, after 15 minutes into it, I just gave up because it was not solving any of the problems
It's
that I
the
was
same
having.
exact problem that I described with the other things.
So
And there is a way to get started.
Hamel, be ready for a fight. You know, I practice my moves over the week, and you know, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Lovely. Thanks so much, my friends. See you.
All right. Thank you.